Hey there, dear listener. Don't panic. I'm not the one narrating tonight's story. My voice isn't exactly bedtime material. I'm just here to wish you a very good night. Even if no one notices, you've been fighting your own battles, and I hope everything in your life turns out just the way you want. If you like, you can join the Prehistoric Sleep family by subscribing. And hey, if you're on your phone, just tap the screen once and hit that little thumbs up in the corner. Now, get ready for the mysterious life of our saber-toothed tiger. Clear your mind, relax, and enjoy.
The ocean, with the first light of morning, gleamed like a thin silver ribbon across its upper layers, but that brightness at the surface faded within only a few dozen meters as it went deeper in science. This is called the photic zone, the layer between about 0 and 200 meters, where sunlight is still strong enough for photosynthesis. Beyond 200 meters, the light declines rapidly. Past 1,000 meters lies the aphotic zone, the realm of endless night, at the threshold of that unending darkness. A young Megalodon awoke. It was not yet fully grown, but its dorsal fin, balanced as if measuring the ocean's rhythm, its gill slits, working slowly like the pistons of an ancient engine. The Megalodon lived roughly -23 to 3. 6 million years ago, through the Miocene and Pliocene, adults reached 14 to 18 meters, and some estimates push the figure close to 20. Its teeth could reach 15 to 18 centimeters, found in fossil beds like small stone blades cast ashore. The young king carried the heritage of his ancestors in his instincts. Every flex, every turn, whispered of millions of years. In the depths, pressure increases by about 1 atmosphere every 10 meters. At 100 meters, the pressure is roughly 11 times that at the surface. For bony creatures, this can be a threat, but the cartilaginous skeleton of sharks yields more flexibly to pressure. The young Megalodon slipped almost silently among the currents. In the sea, sound travels 4 times faster than in air, so a distant whale song could arrive like a memory. Echoing through the deep that morning, it did a humpback's call. Long trembling rose far away, its tones rolling through the water until they reached him. A faint emptiness stirred in his belly. Hunting time was close, but he did not rush in the ocean's ecology. Megalodon was more than a hunter. It was a regulator, a keeper of balance, culling the weak and the sick so the strong might thrive. He turned toward the thermocline, the invisible boundary where warm surface waters give way to the cold layers below. It can hold fish schools, like a wall, a trap for prey, a vantage for prey, a vantage for the hunter. He read the traces in the water. Sharks have extraordinary smell, able to detect a drop of blood from kilometers away. The lateral line sensed the faintest vibrations. The ampulla of Lorenzini felt the electric whispers of life. He orchestrated these senses perfectly, weaving the signs heard in silence into a map in his mind. From afar came the exhale of a whale calf, its mother. Beside it, a story woven with safety and hope. The young king faced a choice. Nature teaches young predators to lessons, patience and restraint. A hasty strike would clash with the mother, and the dolphins wasting energy, but the ocean rewards those who wait. The Megalodon widened his circles, drawing slow rings around the family, seeking the weakest link, a wound, a broken rhythm. A tired fin near the surface, the currents told him the salt had shifted. Upwellings lifted nutrient-rich water. Toward the light, plankton bloomed. Fish followed, and predators followed them, far offshore. The young king felt the invisible chain of life, and knew he was part of it. He had left his nursery long ago. The open ocean was the true test. When to strike, when to wait. As the sun climbed higher, the wave crests glistened white. Far ahead, seabirds gathered, a sign of life below a school or a hunt. The Megalodon arched toward them, his heart's rhythm blending with that of the sea. Each gill opening and closing, writing a new line in his silent memory. Stories begin with a cry or with a whisper. This one began with the oldest language of the water, the language of vibration. The young king listened to the ocean's heart, and it told him only one thing: wait for your moment. By the day's second half, the wind at the surface had shifted on the open sea. Wind deflects currents, and currents pull at the balance of layers. The young Megalodon did not see this directly, but his senses caught the nuances, small changes in temperature, slight shifts in salinity, new notes in the scent of plankton and fish that day. The thermocline sharpened, warm and clear, above cool and dense, below a boundary between two worlds. An angled mirror for the hunter, where every movement bends and trails. Become easier to read. The young female whale, scarred yet strong, surfaced for breath. Her hot mist burst into the air and vanished. Each exhale is a marker predators can fix upon whales. Surfacing become metronomes as fatigue grows. Intervals shorten as panic rises. The rhythm breaks the young king, memorized. The cadence he respected his prey. For the law of the sea is built on respect and balance. A shark's energy economy is a harsh arithmetic. A burst at the wrong time is costly. So Megalodon often attacks from below at a slight angle with surprise. Its serrated teeth evolved to slice thick skin and fat beneath. The abdomen and at the fin joints lie the crucial points he drew, a wide loop, sliding under the whale's likely path. Then, in the granular quiet of the deep he sensed something else: dolphins. A small group orbiting near the female dolphins are quick and clever. Their coordinated movements can harry a great predator. Their clicking sonar weaves an unseen net in the water. The young dadnet in the water. The young Megalodon had learned, when smaller, how to vanish between its threads. He adjusted his attack angle, accounting for the dolphins' probable counters, and slipped deeper into the aphotic here. Only the faintest flicker of bioluminescent plankton, and far off, the echo of whale song hunting deep, brings another challenge: cold. Some sharks show partial, regional endothermy, Megalodons exact. Thermal physiology remains debated, but great mass can hold warmth longer. The young king managed the chill by using his muscles economically, storing a sharp, explosive burst for the right instant. The whale surfaced again, below the scars. Lower edge, the skin showed a fresh abrasion. He prolonged the wait. Patience is a weapon as the surface turned grey. The weather shifted. The horizon thickened. The wind changed. The wave crests crowded if a storm built. Sight and sound would worsen for all but chaos. Sometimes favors the hunter. The dolphins kept tight formation. It was their choice to make how far they could shield. The young king admired their coordination, how speed joined with intelligence to build a wall. For a moment he considered abandoning the attempt, turning to smaller prey. Then a change touched. The water's scent fatigue, the temps of lactic acid, the faint metallic thread of blood from microscopic wounds. Once his plan clarified, the first contact would only be a probe. He cut through the thermocline, accelerating. A shark's tail stroke is an efficiency marvel. He rose from below at a shallow angle. Across the whale, at the last instant, a dolphin saw him. Clicks flared. Into alarm, the young Megalodon tipped his head, not for the vital point, but aside, delivering a grazing strike. The water tasted metallic for a moment. This was a first touch, not to kill, but to disturb. The rhythm, the whale jolted, the dolphins tangled in confusion. The young king slipped away without losing speed beyond the net of clicks into quiet. He does not breathe in the deep. His gills work the water, but his mind felt as if it had taken a long exhale. He had left a question in the praise. Thoughts, where did it come from? As the storm approached, the ocean's scent grew heavier. The sky sagged like a leaden curtain, and the first big drops of rain struck the surface. Each drop wrote a new alphabet upon the sea. The young king read it, and he smiled in his own silent ancient language, for he knew chaos is the stage of masters. The surface of the ocean by afternoon had grown heavy, like a sheet of grey steel. In the sky, clouds gathered, as if tied together by invisible threads, weaving a wide storm curtain. The wind drew the first fine wrinkles across the water. Then those wrinkles grew into wave crests. The sound of the storm sank beneath the surface as a muffled, low hum. That hum was a call. The young Megalodon knew well the time to accelerate is near. Storms can work in favor of great predators. Rain striking the surface makes it harder to see the hunter. Wave chaos blurs the direction of vibrations. This is the favorite hunting ground of the master of silence. The young king could feel the whale and the dolphin group beginning to feel the storm's touch. Whales usually surface with care, but rain and wave push them into slower and less precise movements. In science, there is a term, predator-prey, stress response. When prey senses danger, the heart rate quickens, more oxygen is pumped to the muscles, but long stress weakens performance. The young female whale, already weary from the small ache of her scar and the effort of her protectors, was now burdened twice over by the storm. The young Megalodon remained at the border between surface and depth. Beneath the roar of the waves, each stroke of his tail drove forward, a mass of muscle 8 to 10 meters long. The tail muscles, made of oxygen-rich red muscle fibers, are built for efficiency across great distances. But now, he knew, he must also call upon the white muscle for bursts of speed as he rose toward the whale. He crossed the upper edge of the thermocline. Here the water was warmer, the view was wider, but the waves bent the light, making shapes flicker and sway. The young king heard the dolphins' clicking net. Their sonar rippled through the water, each click a question about the hunter's presence. The Megalodon answered with silence, slowing his pace, sliding slightly deeper as he neared the whale's left side. A current brushed past, carrying the scent and microscopic tracers from her wound. The nose canals of a shark hold cells that can detect a drop of blood in a billion drops of seawater. The young king now knew exactly the state of his prey. Above, the storm grew stronger. The young Megalodon rose swiftly to dolphins, spotted him. They darted to block his path, but before he reached the vital strike point, he turned and slid. Beneath the whale's belly, he struck lightly at the joint of her fin. Not enough to kill, but enough to throw off her balance and force her to burn. More energy. The water churned under the panicked thrust of the whale's tail. The dolphins scattered in sharp, clicking bursts. The young king withdrew into the deep, slowing his heartbeat. The storm curtain had set the stage. Now the second act was about to begin. While the storm's effects lingered at the surface, the aphotic zone remained calm. As always, here there were only the faint glimmers of phosphorescent plankton and the distant low-frequency sounds. Carried from far away, the songs of the whales could travel for kilometers. But now these songs were short, broken, and uneasy. Fear had entered the prey's mind in the depths. The pressure had risen beyond 20 atmospheres for human divers. This would be deadly, but the Megalodon's cartilage skeleton absorbed this force. Like a cushion, here the young king spent less energy. The cold water slowed his metabolism. The wait was not only for the ambush, but to watch. As the prey's energy drained away, the whale's surfacing intervals were now irregular. The dolphins still circled, but their formation had frayed. A few individuals were lost in the storm's troughs. Before appearing again, this meant gaps were forming in the line of defense. In shark hunting strategy, there is a method called the test bite first, a light bite or a strike to measure the prey's strength. Then the true attack. The young king had measured the whale's resistance with the earlier contact, and now he waited for the perfect moment, for the second strike from the surface. The sound of rain could be heard, even here. Each drop drew tiny circles on the ocean's skin, and the ripples reached kilometers deep. The Megalodon used these vibrations to build a picture of the movement above. He began to rise slowly. This time, his target was the muscle tissue beneath the whale's side fins. A strike here would limit her maneuverability in a serious way. As he crossed the thermocline, he warmed his muscles. The moment for explosive power was near. At that instant, one of the dolphins spotted him. The clicks turned into alarm. Again, the whale surged upward. Her massive body rose into the rain, a dark island against the grey sky. The young king shifted his attack angle, sliding sideways without getting too close to the surface. This was the final rehearsal for patience. The storm was at its peak. Wave crests broke foam, flung into the air. The curtain of rain cut surface visibility to only a few meters. This was the moment the young Megalodon had been waiting for. The whale's weary breath rose as steam above the water. The young king rose quickly from the deep. The thrust from his powerful tail strokes carried him to the target. In moments the dolphins saw him. At the last instant, they darted into his path, but he tilted his body and slid between them. The strike point was clear, just above the fatty tissue under the whale's belly. This place was rich in nourishment and would send blood flowing fast. The young king opened his jaws. The serrated giant teeth of both jaws tore easily through skin and fat. For a heartbeat, the color of the ocean changed. The whale's cry rolled through the depths. Like a deep echo, the dolphins attacked, circling fast, trying to distract him. But the Megalodon kept hold of his prey and drew it down into the deep. In the depths, the dolphins' speed slowed. Their agility diminished. Within minutes, the whale could no longer resist. Her tired muscles had no more to give. Amid the chaos of the storm, the young king fed slowly, fulfilling the ocean's law. The strong survive, the weak fall. Balance is kept. As the storm began to fade, the surface grew calm again. The young king's body disappeared into the deep. His story was not over. This was only his first great victory. The ocean, leaving behind the noise of the storm, slowly returned to its old breath On the surface, there was still foam on the crests of the waves, but the sky had opened, and between the clouds, a soft sunlight began to slip through. In the depths, little had changed. The darkness still held its quiet kingdom, the young Megalodon. After the whale hunt had filled the emptiness in his belly, and now was entering the time to gather his strength again in the sea. The period after a kill is critical for predators. A whale is rich in energy, especially its thick layer of fat, the blubber. For Megalodon, this fat was not only energy, but a fuel that allowed him to live for weeks. Without hunting, but victory has other consequences. The ocean, though it seems silent, is always alive. With information, the scent of blood can be felt from kilometers away. And this draws other predators, great white sharks, killer whales, and even giant sperm. Whales follow scent trails. The young Megalodon had pulled his kill into the deep. Here, the scent spreads more slowly, and the trail is harder to follow in these depths. The pressure was now around 25 to 30 atmospheres. For humans, it would be deadly. But for him, it was normal. His cartilage skeleton, more flexible than heavy bones, absorbed the force with ease, and his great mass protected him from sudden changes in pressure. Human divers can suffer the bends, but sharks carry no such risk as he fed. The young king watched the surroundings. The seafloor here was soft and sandy. There were scattered coral skeletons made of calcium carbonate, and starfish resting a few meters away. A slow-moving giant jellyfish drifted with the current. Its transparent tissue glimmered briefly, like a ghost in the dark. The Megalodon's eyes were adapted to low light. Like most sharks, his eyes had a reflective layer, the tapetum lucidum. This layer bounced light back onto the retina, increasing night vision even in rest. This watchfulness was his key to survival. Around the whale's body, small movements began. First, a few small sharks, then scavenger fish. These were the ocean's cleaning crew, feeding on what the great predator left behind. They were no threat, but if they came too close, one swipe of his tail could scatter them easily. Though his belly was full, the young king stayed by his kill. This was both feeding and guarding. Behavior sharks rarely keep a permanent territory, but with a large food source, they defend for a while. The water temperature here was about 4 degrees. Cold slows metabolism and digestion to digest. A whale would take days during digestion. A predator hunts less and lets the body focus on recovery. He rose slowly, not to reach the surface, but to check the mid-water currents. Currents are like invisible roads. A predator that finds the right current can travel for kilometers with little effort. This is vital during migration. Scientists believe sharks use currents and temperature changes to set their migration routes. The young king glided through the water. From far away, a low-frequency song reached him. Another whale, but this song was not uneasy. It was long, rhythmic, and calm, likely a lone male, separated from his group. The Megalodon kept the sound in mind for the days ahead. The sun's light, now clearer, after the storm drifted through the water, it shimmered like golden dust spread through the sea. The young king savored the moment. Food, energy, rest. Life in the ocean was built on this cycle, and he was at the top of it. He tore off another piece of the whale. His teeth, serrated and huge, cut the fibers like carved wood. His bite force was immense, between 10 and 18 tons. It was this power that had kept him king of the oceans for millions of years. Digestion would be slow, but the young king was in no hurry. The ocean rewards the patient. Patience was in his blood. In the depths, silence ruled again. Only the breath of the sea, the whale's body, slowly fading, and the young king's steady strokes remained. The ocean reminded him once more that survival is not just about strength, but knowing when to act. Several days had passed since the whale hunt. The silence of the depths had given the young Megalodon calm and fresh strength in his muscles. The process of digestion was still ongoing. It met his body's needs for energy and kept him from wasting effort on unnecessary hunts. But the ocean never offers a predator a truly peaceful time. Every day means a new trail, a new danger. In the mid-depths where sunlight was weak, he felt the currents shift direction. This was a sign of the ocean's seasons. Like winds on land, currents in the sea change with the seasons. Some bring warm, nutrient-poor waters. Others carry cold, plankton-rich flows. Plankton, the base of the food chain. When it blooms, everything from small fish to whales is affected. The young king knew this change could increase hunting potential, but this shift also meant something else. Rivals large predators find rich waters by scent. The young Megalodon felt tiny differences in salinity and temperature in the water passing through his gills. Those differences meant life and movement, and he knew other hunters could read the same signs. And then the owner of those signals arrived. First a shadow, then a pair of bright eyes, then, with the distinctive color of its white lower jaw, appeared a great white shark, Carcharodon carcharias, one of the most feared predators of the modern age, a distant relative of the Megalodon. But this meeting meant rivalry, not kinship. The great white was far smaller, about 5 to 6 meters, but known for speed, agility, and curiosity. The young king did not underestimate his rival in the ocean. Survival is not only about size, strategy, and timing can overcome sheer power. The great white began to circle, drawing wide loops. This behavior meant both threat and curiosity. Predators often watch each other. This way, measuring reactions, the young Megalodon rose from the deep. With strong tail strokes, he pushed the water to position himself below his rival. In the world of sharks, coming from below is an advantage, a better attack angle. The great white kept circling, sometimes making sharp turns, closing distance, then pulling away. Again, scientific observations show that in such encounters, the smaller shark usually leaves first, but if food is valuable, it may take the risk. The young king knew there was no large prey nearby, but this area was important for the potential brought by the changing currents, so he did not give up his position. The great white, after one more circle, began to move away. This was a sign it would not enter direct conflict. The young Megalodon respected this choice. Wasting energy went against the unwritten laws of the ocean, but the meeting was a warning. These waters were not his alone. After the rival was gone, the young king turned his path toward mid-depths. Closer to the coast, coastal waters can be rich in food. River mouths bring organic matter and trigger plankton blooms, but they are also dangerous. Shallows limit maneuverability for large bodies, and here other threats appear: ships, fishing nets, the roar of engines in the Megalodon's time. Humans did not yet exist, but nature had its own dangers. Shallows held giant tides, sandbars, and rocky passages. The young king approached such areas with care, no matter how large. Getting stuck or injured could mean the end. As he neared the coast, the color of the water changed. The deep blue shifted to green and murky. This meant high density of phytoplankton, microscopic life using sunlight to photosynthesize, producing much of the ocean's oxygen. Their abundance drew small fish, which in turn drew predators. The young Megalodon caught new scents, this time not a whale, but a medium-sized toothed whale, likely a pilot whale. They usually travel in pods, 5 to 7 meters long, strong in groups, but a single separated individual becomes easy prey. The young king might have taken the chance, but digestion was not yet complete. A chase requiring speed and energy without perfect timing was risky, so he only watched. In the haze of the water he saw silhouettes from afar, pilot whales communicating in clicks and whistles. Their voices travel kilometers in water. Such a network makes hunting harder. The young Megalodon would have to learn ways to break that network, because in the ocean, every species sharpens its mind to survive. As the sun set, the upper layers turned gold and orange. The young king slipped back into the deep darkness. Was his ally and the depths his safest refuge? But this night, even in sleep, he would remain alert. For now he knew, in this part of the ocean, he was not alone. The night in the ocean was nothing like the night on land. On land, night's silence could be broken by the wind or the sound of insects. But in the sea, night was heavy. Like a deep breath, sounds was swallowed, light was gone. Only vibrations remained for the young Megalodon. These hours were a time not for hunting, but for exploration. The aphotic zone, where light vanished completely, became even darker at night with the arrival of cold currents. Most creatures here had bioluminescence, the ability to produce their own light. Some used it to lure prey, others to hide from predators. Tonight, there were transparent lanternfish drifting slowly around the young king. Their light organs flashed in rhythm like a field of stars. In the deep, the young Megalodon paid them no interest. They were far too low in the food chain. But these lights held another meaning for a hunter. The movements of prey and other predators could be read in the way these lights shifted. If a school of fish suddenly changed direction, it meant a threat was near. Tonight, such a ripple happened. The lights swept suddenly to the right, then dropped quickly downward. The young king sharpened his senses. The ampulla of Lorenzini picked up tiny changes in the water's electric field. This change came from the muscles of a large animal moving nearby. His sense of smell told the same story. There was a mammal close, but the scent was not as strong as whale. Likely a sea lion or a seal. Normally, such species were found in warmer waters near the coast, but some crossed the open sea during migration. Such journeys were the opportunities great predators waited for. For the young Megalodon, this could be the chance to crown the night with a hunt. He rose quietly, the broad lobes of his tail pushed the water, almost without sound, to approach without frightening. The prey he let his body drift with the current adjusting course. With small fin movements in the darkness, shapes were blurred, but his electric sense guided him sharply at last. He saw the silhouette, a medium-sized sea lion, alone, likely separated from its group, its route lost in the open sea. Such solitude was almost an invitation. Scientists have observed that sharks choose prey that is alone or wounded. The reason is energy efficiency. Easier prey means less wasted effort. The young king knew this instinctively. He slid beneath the sea lion. When the moment came, he surged upward from the deep. with explosive speed. A shark's short-range acceleration was like a land predator's sudden sprint. White muscle fibers burned oxygen reserves fast, producing great power in seconds. The young Megalodon reached his prey when his jaws opened. The serrated teeth of his upper jaw cast a shadow even in the water. The sea lion noticed at the last moment it twisted to escape. But in the open sea, such maneuvers were useless. There were no rocks, no shallows to hide in. The young king increased his speed with a flick of his tail. He struck the rear fin of the prey, not enough to kill, but enough to unbalance. The second move ended it. As the sea lion's blood drifted into the water, small, shimmering fish closed. In this was proof of the deep's law. One creature's death fed countless lives. The young Megalodon pulled his prey into deeper water, feeding briefly at mid-depth to keep it from scavengers. The fatty tissue of the sea lion was less energy than whale, but easier to digest. It was a quick boost on the cool night. As he descended after the hunt, he heard other sounds, this time a mix of clicks and whistles. Dolphins, likely a small group, hunting after the storm. Dolphins were known for their intelligence and their ability to sense danger. If they detected the Megalodon, they would alarm the entire area. The young king did not approach. A chase without reason meant wasted energy and frightened prey instead. He recorded the sound in his mind by reading the direction of the sound waves. He could predict their path, a detail that might help another day. In the darkness of the depths, with the scent of salt, the fresh trace of his kill, and the distant lights of bioluminescence, he drifted. Slowly night was preparing to give way to day. The ocean's surface had not yet seen the sun, but the currents of the deep already carried the feel of a new beginning, and the young king knew that every new day brought both opportunity and danger. The first rays of the sun painted the surface gold as the young Megalodon slowly rose from the depths. The coolness of the night was replaced by a mild, warm layer from the sun. This meant that life near the surface was beginning to stir. Morning in the ocean meant new opportunities for hunters and new dangers for prey. That morning there was a distinct change in the direction of the currents. The young king felt it in every fiber of his body. The currents pulled him westward like an invisible road. Scientists have long studied how large sharks and whales use these ocean highways. Currents not only save energy, but lead to places where the food chain is richer. This current was born from a cold, deep-sea flow, traveling thousands of kilometers. Such currents bring nutrient-rich water from the depths up to the surface. This event is called upwelling. It triggers blooms of phytoplankton, followed by schools of small fish, then mid-sized predators, and finally the top hunters. The young Megalodon was at the top of that chain, but the lower links were the guarantee of his existence. The journey had begun. Migration was not only for birds or mammals. Many fish and sea creatures had it in their life cycle. Fossil records and isotope analysis of teeth suggest that megalodons also made seasonal migrations. In some regions, their teeth are found only in certain times of the year. The young king kept pace with the rhythm of the current. Using minimal energy, his tail moved in long, powerful strokes at regular intervals. At times, he simply drifted, letting the current carry him. In the open ocean, there was no rock to rest on, no cave to hide in. Rest came only from moving with the water. Along the way, he met other creatures. First, a few giant manta rays appeared, their wingspans stretching 5 to 6 meters. They fed on plankton and posed no threat to him. But their presence was a sign that plankton was plentiful, and where plankton was plentiful, bigger prey would follow later. Slender-bodied sailfish appeared on the horizon. The sail-like fins on their backs helped them turn sharply in the water. They were fast but alone. They could be easy prey. The young king could have caught one with a short chase, but during migration he hunted only to replace the energy he spent. The real target was the rich feeding ground where the current would take him days past, and the only difference between night and day was the amount of light in the depths. Temperature stayed constant and darkness ruled, but near the surface the silver shimmer of moonlight or the golden flicker of daylight created a visual feast. The Megalodon's eyes had evolved to see clearly, both in low light and in brightness. One night, as the moonlight stretched like a silver road across the surface, the young king caught a new scent. This time it was familiar but strong. A whale pod. Whales followed fixed routes during migration. Some species used the same path for thousands of kilometers. This pod was likely traveling from cold northern feeding grounds to warmer breeding waters. They would have to protect their calves. Along the way, a whale calf was high-energy prey, but a risky target. Adults in the pod could form a coordinated defense. As long as the pod stayed together, the chance to attack was low. So the young king kept his distance, watching patiently. In migration, opportunities often came to those who waited during this watch. Another danger emerged from the opposite direction. Came a deep, powerful clicking. It belonged to a pod of orcas. Orcas were serious rivals. For a megalodon they hunted in groups, were intelligent and attacked with strategy. A lone orca might not threaten a young megalodon, but a group could overwhelm even the strongest sharks. Though the sound came from far, the young king shifted his course slightly. Avoiding conflict during migration increased the odds of survival in the ocean. The rule was simple: take no unnecessary risks. A wound could mean weeks of recovery and hunger in the meantime. As days passed, the current shifted from warmer waters to cooler ones. This was a sign that the destination was near. The water grew clearer. Plankton density rose visibly. Seabirds appeared on the horizon. They meant that schools of fish were near the surface. For most predators, the gathering of birds was like a flare marking the hunt. The young megalodon knew the journey's end was close ahead. Lay one of the richest hunting grounds in the ocean here. Every link of the chain was present: plankton, small fish, mid-sized hunters, and at the top, the giants. And with such abundance came both opportunity and conflict. Gliding in the depths, he listened to the rhythm of his own heart. The purpose of the journey was not just to feed, it was to prepare for the next act in the struggle. For survival, to gather strength, to test his limits. Because in the ocean, being king meant being alert always, and the young king knew that at the end of this journey awaited both new victories and new enemies. After days of traveling, the young megalodon finally reached the region where the current had carried him. This was one of the richest areas in the ocean here. Warm surface currents met cold, deep waters. Every link of the food chain was present in this place. The color of the water had turned to a deep green blue due to the density of phytoplankton near the surface. Millions of plankton used sunlight for photosynthesis, producing oxygen and attracting schools of small fish. Scientists call such places ocean soup. They are filled with life. Sardines, mackerel, and anchovy-like fish move in vast groups to feed on plankton. These schools can stretch for kilometers. When a predator approaches, they turn in perfect coordination, forming a bait ball. The bait ball makes attack more difficult, but is also an open buffet for hunters from above and below. As the young Megalodon glided through this sea of fish, he observed the activity around him. Above, seabirds plunged into the water, snatching fish in their beaks before taking off again. At mid-depths, dolphin pods darted with sharp maneuvers, herding fish into tighter masses. This was part of their cooperative strategy: control the prey and strike efficiently. But the Megalodon's eyes were set on larger targets. Other giants were drawn to this abundance. On the horizon, a large whale pod appeared. They were likely brides, whales to 12 to 14 meters in length. They fed on plankton and small fish, often surfacing before sweeping massive gulps of water and prey into their open mouths. This feeding shifted the distribution of small fish, creating new opportunities for opportunistic predators. The young king did not plan to attack the whole pod. Bride's whales were fast and resilient, but a calf or a straggler might be worth the risk, so he kept his distance. Following quietly from the depths came another vibration, different from the heavy beats of a whale. Lower, steadier, more rhythmic. The young Megalodon knew this sound: orcas. This place held not only opportunity, but danger. Orcas are among the ocean's most intelligent hunters. They hunt in groups, using complex strategies to weaken and exhaust their prey. A bear. Single orca was no great threat, but a group of 5 or 6 could overpower even the largest sharks. The young king could not ignore them. He sank slowly into deeper water. Depth was his fortress. Orcas were more effective in shallower waters. His plan was to watch and wait for a chance to strike. This kind of stolen kill is not rare in nature. Just as lions steal from hyenas or eagles take from other birds in the sea, predators rob one another. The orcas had targeted a bride's whale. The group surrounded it, one biting at its fin, another blocking its path. This limited its movement and drained its strength. The young king watched from a safe distance. He had no wish to engage them directly, but if the whale fell, he could take part of the carcass. As the struggle continued, fish schools scattered and seabirds wheeled overhead, looking for new chances. Moments like these in the ocean were like a stage in a vast theater. Every species had its role, and before the curtain fell, each would play their part. The whale's cry vibrated through the water, a signal of its weakening. As the orcas made their final moves, the young king began to close in from the depths. He rose silently, his vast body hidden in the gloom. The orcas were focused on the whale's head that gave him the perfect chance to approach from below. In a burst of explosive speed, he slid beneath the whale and tore away a chunk of thick blubber with his serrated teeth. It was not enough to kill the whale, but it was high energy, nourishment. The orcas suddenly realized the direction of the attack and turned toward him, but the young king lashed his tail and shot down into the deep. Moments later, the orcas returned to feeding on what was left of the whale. From a safe distance, the young king watched. He had taken a reward without risking too much. By the ocean's law, this was still a victory. As the sun slowly set, the water's surface glowed orange and red. This rich region would offer him countless chances in the days ahead, but as always with opportunity came danger. As long as the young Megalodon could keep this balance, he could remain king. For several days, in the fertile hunting grounds, the young Megalodon remained cautious. The ocean, no matter how generous, punishes careless predators at every chance he had fed, restoring his energy. But even in this abundance, something kept catching his attention. Individuals separated from the group. For a predator, a lone prey is worth gold. There is no group defense, no others to come to its aid. These chances are short-lived, for in the ocean, solitude rarely lasts long that morning. In the deep green of the water, such an opportunity appeared on the horizon. A young Cuban humpback whale moved with weary strokes, cutting through the water. This individual had likely been separated from its pod during migration. Humpback whales, on their migration routes, travel immense distances between breeding grounds and feeding grounds. Along the way, they must manage their energy carefully. A whale that becomes exhausted, especially when alone, is an attractive target for top-tier predators. When the young Megalodon spotted the whale, he was deep below. First, he cut across its path. He began tracing wide circles to study the whale's movements. The humpback released blasts of breath through its blowhole, sending hypersure mist into the air, then dove again, but its breathing intervals were growing shorter. That was a sign of fatigue. Sharks are masters at analyzing the movement patterns of their prey. It is not only instinct, but a learned tactic. The young king was memorizing the whale's speed, the angles of its turns, and its breathing rhythm in the ocean. An attack often comes with only one true chance. Fail, and you lose energy and alert your prey before closing in. The Megalodon assessed the conditions around him. The currents were mild. Visibility was good. It was a favorable setup for a fast strike. All he needed was to control the depth difference. Positioning beneath the whale would increase the element of surprise. He descended. As the pressure grew, he felt a slight tightening in the cavities around his ears. But for him, it was harmless. What humans might call barotrauma did not affect sharks. Their flexible, cartilage-based skeletons absorbed the pressure. Balancing it, this was a vital advantage in deep water hunts. When the whale angled upward toward the surface, the young king moved with powerful strokes of his tail. He gathered speed, but let the current carry him until the moment of attack. This silence delayed the prey's awareness. As the whale broke the surface, sunlight gleamed on its body. That was the final signal from the depths. The Megalodon surged like a missile when his jaws opened. His teeth gleamed even underwater like blades. The target was the soft tissue beneath the pectoral fins. A strike there could limit movement and accelerate blood loss. If successful, the whale would tire within hours. The first impact sent a massive splash erupting at the surface. The whale lashed its immense tail in retaliation. The force befitted a creature weighing many tons. A direct hit to the Megalodon's body could have caused serious internal injury. If not shattered bone, the young king swerved aside, narrowly avoiding the blow. The whale was resilient. It understood it was facing a predator, smaller in size, but powerful. It dove quickly, seeking to vanish in the depths, but the Megalodon's sense of smell made that effort meaningless. Sharks can detect even a single drop of blood in a billion parts of water. The wound from the first strike was now a compass leading the hunter. The young king waited for his second strike from below. He observed the whale's slowing pace. This time he approached, not from directly beneath, but at a slight angle that would keep him out of the whale's sight and cut off its escape path. The second attack was harder than the first. His serrated teeth tore away a chunk of thick skin, As blood clouded the water, the whale's strength began to fade. The young Megalodon could taste the scent of victory, but it did not rush. Experienced hunters know that letting an exhausted prey wear down fully reduces risk. Sometime later, the whale surfaced. Its breathing was erratic, its movements uncontrolled. The Megalodon prepared his third and final strike from the depths. He shot upward, slamming a crushing blow into the whale's underside. This time, there was no counterattack. The ocean fell quiet. The whale ceased its motion. The young king dragged his prey into the depths. Here, where sunlight faded, smaller predators would have more difficulty reaching it. As he fed, his powerful jaws tore through thick muscle, his serrated teeth slicing the fibers with ease. This lone hunt had given the young Megalodon not only a massive boost of energy, but also confidence. He had proven that he was not only an opportunist, but a patient strategist, and, in the ocean, the combination of these two was the true key to a kingdom. A few days had passed since the humpback whale hunt. The young Megalodon alternated between feeding and resting in the depths, conserving his energy. The digestion process was still underway. The whale's thick layer of blubber would provide enough energy to last for weeks, but in the ocean, comfort never lasts long, no matter how much he felt like the king of this region. The deep sea belongs to no king alone. That morning, the currents had quietly shifted near the surface. Small fish schools scattered in panic. The vibration of the water had changed. This only happens when a large predator is approaching. The young Meg was instantly on alert. His lateral line system detected the smallest movements in the water, and the ampulla of Lorenzini sensed faint electrical signals. These vibrations were familiar, yet foreign, like hearing the echo of his own footsteps in the darkness. His eyes strained to distinguish shapes. First a vague shadow, then a tall dorsal fin. The body length was almost equal to his own. It was another Megalodon, and an adult male. At that fossil evidence suggests that Megalodons likely lived solitary lives, but encounters between two individuals in the same region, especially in fertile hunting grounds, were possible, and such meetings were rarely peaceful. The newcomer's body was thicker, his jaws broader. He approached with slow but confident strokes of his fins. Such an approach could be a direct challenge. Predators, especially of the same species, often determined territory right through sheer dominance. The young king did not underestimate his rival. He was not yet fully grown. His jaws' strength and mass were less than the others, but he had agility and speed on his side. In the ocean, survival is as much about intelligence as it is about power. As he watched the rival's circling movements, he realized this was more of a warning display than an immediate attack. It was a silent way of saying, "This territory is not yours." Scientists observe that such behavior between sharks often ends with brief shoving before one departs, but sometimes it escalates. A clash between two giants requires not only jaw strength, but stamina, strategy, and courage. Suddenly, the rival Megalodon accelerated. The powerful strokes of his tail sent pressure waves through the water. The young king swerved slightly aside, avoiding a direct collision. Avoiding contact reduced the risk of injury. The rival was testing him, measuring his speed and reflexes. This was not hunting, but weighing an opponent. The first contact came as a light shoulder bump. Shark skin is covered in tiny tooth-like scales called dermal denticles. They reduce drag in the water, but when touched, they scrape like sandpaper. When the two bodies brushed, the friction made a metallic rasp. In the water, the young Megalodon did not retaliate immediately. Instead, he retreated deeper. The depths could make his rival's larger body less maneuverable, and in low light, his own eye adaptation could give him the advantage. The rival followed, but slowed his pursuit. This meant the confrontation would be drawn out. Deeper still, the pressure increased, and the temperature dropped here. Fast maneuvers cost more energy. The young king aimed to force his rival to spend more. Circling slowly, he lured him deeper, colder. The rival's greater mass meant he would tire sooner, but the tactic could not last forever. In the deep, there was no prey, and the tension was rising. The rival suddenly surged upward, cutting across the young king's path with a sharp turn. This move could lead directly to a jaw strike, opening his mouth slightly. The rival displayed his teeth among sharks. This is the clearest threat signal. The young Megalodon kept his jaws shut in response. This could mean, I do not want to fight, but also, I am not leaving for several tense seconds. They stared in the heavy silence of the ocean then. The rival began to back away, slowly. It did not mean surrender. Only that for now, this meeting was over. As the rival disappeared, the young king drew water deep through his gills. Like a steadying breath, the encounter had taught him an important lesson. Even if you are king of the ocean, there will always be someone larger or more experienced, and sometimes to keep your strength, not fighting, is also a strategy. The rest of the day he spent in the depths. The cold water relaxed his muscles and calmed his mind. But in a corner of his thoughts, one question lingered in the next encounter. Will he still have the choice to walk away? The ocean had been calm for days, but on the horizon, change was coming. Before the sun could set, the sky turned grey. Clouds grew heavy, and the wind shifted sharply. This was a summons, felt even. In the deep, a storm was coming. Storms are as destructive as they are nourishing to the ocean ecosystem. Violent waves churn the surface, stirring nutrients from the seafloor to the upper layers. This triggers plankton blooms and quickly revitalizes the food chain. But during a storm, the surface waters are chaos itself. Visibility drops. Sounds are muffled. Currents become unpredictable. And for predators, this chaos means both opportunity and danger. The young Megalodon could feel the first tremors of the storm in the depths. Pressure was dropping fast. Fish and marine mammals can sense this change. Beforehand, most retreat to safer waters, but for predators, it is a signal that chaos is beginning. With a powerful sweep of his tail, he rose to mid-depths. Here, the turbulence could be felt, but visibility was still partly intact in the distance. A frenzy of movement. Fish, schools tangled together. Dolphins darted wildly from place to place. This was the storm's reflection. Underwater order had collapsed. Then suddenly, a scent reached his nose. Familiar, but intense. Blood, fresh and strong. In a storm, the weak or the wounded can easily become prey. The Megalodon surged forward. Following the trail through the murky water, the ampulla of Lorenzini drew him a clear path. Near the surface, a large shadow appeared. As he approached, he saw it was a young toothed whale, disoriented. In the storm, a fresh wound marked its side, likely from striking a rocky reef. Blood spilled quickly into the water. The young king moved with caution. A storm-time attack was far more dangerous than usual. Sudden currents could break his momentum. Murky water could ruin his aim. But this chance was worth the risk. With rhythmic strokes of his tail, he positioned himself beneath the whale, as he struck a powerful undercurrent thrown by the waves, shoved him off angle. It took seconds to recover, but seconds were enough for the whale to defend the whale's tail. Whipped hard, smashing into his left pectoral fin. A sharp pain flared through the muscle beneath his skin, not fatal, but enough to limit his movement. Ignoring the pain, he repositioned, this time with more care. Approaching from a slight diagonal, he raked his serrated teeth across the whale's belly. Blood billowed into the cloudy water like a dark storm within a storm. The whale cried out, a deep, powerful sound that could carry for kilometers. But in the storm, sound was twisted and scattered. Perhaps no other predator would hear still. The Megalodon chose to end it quickly. His second strike tore deep under the whale's pectoral fin. The whale slowed. Losing strength, the young king dragged his prey into mid-depths. But the storm was not done. Currents pulled and shoved, even as he fed. The pain in his fin dulled his maneuvers in the ocean. Being wounded is dangerous even for a predator, because the scent of blood is an open invitation, and the invitation did not take long to be answered. Through the murk, a bulky shape approached, another shark, likely a 5 or 6 meter great white, one of the opportunists who follow storms in search of easy prey. The intruder swam straight for the whale. The young Megalodon opened his jaws and placed his body in the intruder's path. The message was clear. This kill is mine. The great white hesitated, circled once, then retreated. A small victory that kept the young king's claim, but his injured fin meant such victories might not last as the storm began to fade. The Megalodon had consumed most of the whale, yet the ache in his fin remained sharp. In the days to come, this wound would test him, because in the ocean, a wounded king must be more watchful than ever. 2 days had passed since the storm. The ocean had calmed again, but the young Megalodon was still wounded. The blow to his left fin had thrown off his swimming balance. His tail strokes, normally strong and rhythmic, now carried a slight drift from time to time, slowing his maneuvers. This directly affected his hunting strategy. In the ocean, being injured can be deadly, even for a predator, because the scent of blood attracts not only hunters, but also opportunistic rivals. Smaller sharks, giant rays, even certain whales can turn aggressive toward a wounded predator. The young king knew this, so he minimized his movements. He retreated to a quiet current in the deep. To rest, scientists observe that when sharks are wounded, they slow their metabolism. To conserve energy, they move less, feed only when necessary, allowing the body to devote more energy to healing. The young Megalodon followed this strategy. His priority was closing the wound. The area was far from shore, but moderately rich in food. Small fish schools passed by often, and mid-sized hunters occasionally wandered in. The young king chose only the easiest targets, no high-speed chases. Instead, he picked off the weak or slow from schools carried by the current. During this period, his diet also changed. Normally, he would seek high-energy prey like whales, but injured, such a risk was unwise. Instead, he fed on high-fat fish like tuna and mackerel. These provided energy and were easier to digest. His skin gave him an advantage in healing. Shark skin is covered in tiny tooth-like scales, dermal denticles. They reduce drag, but also make it hard for microorganisms to attach. This lowers infection risk. Still, open wounds are always dangerous in the ocean. Parasites will target them if given the chance. From time to time, the young king rammed his body with sharp fin strikes to shake off small parasites during his rest. He also witnessed the other side of deep-sea life. Huge crabs roamed coral formations, not prey but fascinating to watch. Once a long-bodied deep-sea squid tried to startle him with its glowing arms. Such encounters were diversions for a wounded king. By the third day, the pain in his fin began to fade. The wound edges were sealing with new skin tissue. The speed of this healing was proof he was still a healthy predator, but he still needed time to regain full strength. In the ocean, the rules are simple. The weak are eaten by the strong. So when wounded, invisibility is survival. At night, he glided among the lights of bioluminescent creatures, and in his mind, one thought repeated: this is only temporary. The young Megalodon was patient because he knew that once healed he would return to the great hunts. By the fifth day, the pain was nearly gone. He still could not maneuver at full speed, but his endurance had grown slowly. He could shift toward more energy-demanding prey. This recovery had taught him a valuable lesson. Not every battle requires the strongest bite. Sometimes patience is the sharpest tooth. In the ocean at sunset, a small pod of young whales appeared near the surface. For now, he did not attack, but he did not take his eyes off them. With his wounds closing, he was already planning his next hunt that night. As he sank into the deep, the cold tightened his muscles, and the currents whispered a silent song, a song of patience and waiting, and the young Megalodon knew every note by heart. It had been about a week since his injury. There was still a slight stiffness in his left fin, but his mobility had largely returned. As the young Megalodon glided through the depths, he decided to test himself. Slow turns, sharp changes, sudden bursts of speed. The powerful rhythm of his tailstrokes had returned. This was the sign that hunting season was near. That morning, the water's color was different. Normally, the upper layers in this region were clear blue, but now they were murky and greenish. This meant a heavy plankton bloom near the surface. Plankton draws small fish schools, which in turn attract mid-sized predators. And finally, the giants at the very top of the chain. In the ocean, everything is linked, and at the top of this chain was the young king from the depths. Vibrations caught his attention. They came from a large creature, moving with strong but rhythmic force. Through his ampulla of Lorenzini, he sensed the electric field generated by muscle contractions. The signal belonged neither to a whale nor an orca. It was quicker, more agile. As he approached, he saw the shadow, a massive school of Pacific bluefin tuna. These fish could reach 2 to 3 meters and swim at speeds close to 70 kilometers per hour for a megalodon. They were small, but their high fat content and protein made them an excellent energy source. Fast prey like this was also a test of agility and endurance for any predator. The school moved in perfect coordination. When they turned, flashes of silver rippled through the water. These flashes acted like a beacon to hunters. The young king positioned himself beneath them. This was the perfect launch point. On the first attempt, he targeted the very last fish in the line. Attacking from behind delays the prey's reaction. He whipped his tail, slicing through the water, gaining speed, but tuna are quick to react. The target darted away. In a sudden change of direction, in the sharp turn, he felt a twinge in his old wound, a reminder that he wasn't fully healed. But he didn't stop on the second try. He predicted where the school would turn. He approached from a diagonal angle. This time he struck true. His serrated teeth tore through the fish's tough scaled skin. The bite instantly robbed the tuna of control, dragging it down into the depths. He fed the oily flesh, was pure energy, exactly what he needed in the final stage of recovery. While resting, he noticed the surrounding movement. The scattering of the school meant other predators had entered the area. A shadow appeared in the distance and vanished. It was familiar and dangerous. A great white shark, around 5 or 6 meters, likely drawn by the dispersing school looking for an easy meal. The young king angled his body slightly to the side, a shark's way of saying, "I'm here." The great white circled briefly, then withdrew, a small victory, but proof that he could still command the territory. Later that day, a new scent spread through the lower layers. It belonged to a large pod of whales. Even without seeing them, the young Megalodon began planning. This pod could be his next true challenge. That night, as he drifted in the deep, he felt his wound was healed, his strength was back, and he was ready to chase the great hunts once more. The abundance of plankton, fish, schools, and whales promised days ahead, both rich and dangerous, and the young king loved the scent of danger. The first rays of the sun spread across the ocean's surface like a sheet of gold as the young Megalodon rose from the depths. The salt in the water smelled different that morning, denser, sharper, more alive. It carried the scent of a powerful presence from hundreds of kilometers away. A whale pod for sharks. The scent of whales is not limited to blood. The oily layers shed from their skin, tiny flakes of flesh, even the organic matter expelled from their breath can be detected from miles away. Through his ampulla of Lorenzini, the young king read this organic signature clearly, and it meant only one thing: a great opportunity. From beyond visual range, low-frequency sounds pulsed through the water. It was the whales speaking to one another. Every species has its own frequency patterns. These tones belonged to gray whales. Gray whales can reach 12 to 14 meters, and during migration often pass near coastal waters. But this pod was traveling the open sea route, and that made them more vulnerable. As the Megalodon rose, light from above shimmered over the whales' bodies, gray backs streaked with silver where the waves broke. The closer he got, the larger the pod appeared. 10 adult whales and 2 calves. Moving in a wide formation, the calves swam close to their mothers, and the mothers guarded them with their massive bodies, like living shields. The young king did not attack immediately. This is one of the oldest lessons in the ocean. Read first, strike later. He studied each individual, noting swimming tempos, direction changes, breathing intervals. When the whales surfaced and expelled clouds of breath, it gave him even more information. Shorter, uneven breathing meant fatigue or weakness. One female caught his attention. She swam slightly behind the others. Her tail strokes were slowing, each one separated by longer pauses. She was tired, but still swam beside her calf. The effort to protect her young was draining her stamina. The Megalodon began to plan his first move. For a high-speed strike, positioning was key. Predators often attack from below. It keeps them in the prey's blind spot, and for whales, a threat from above is far less expected. The young king slipped beneath the thermocline. The thermocline is the boundary where warm surface water meets cold, deep water. Light bends there. Density shifts, creating a kind of visual curtain. The plan was to burst through the thermocline, strike hard, and spark panic in the pod. Among sharks, this is called a test bite. A first strike to measure the prey's reaction, slow. Tail strokes, a shadow rising, silent and steady. His target was not the calf, but the mother. If the mother weakened, the calf would be exposed, breaking through the thermocline. He unleashed his speed. The cold depths lit his muscles on fire. White muscle fibers ignited for a short burst of explosive power. He struck from the side under the mother's pectoral fin, without fully opening his jaws. It wasn't fatal, but the shock was enough to send her reeling. The calf panicked, breaking away the other whales, tightened formation, and their high-pitched alarm calls echoed for miles. The young king pulled back into the depths. A panicked pod cannot mount a coordinated defense, but they also cannot remain in panic. For long, the chaos could open another window, this time for the calf itself. The calf tried to return to the center of the pod. The Megalodon surged upward, but at the last moment, the mother swung back. Her massive tail slammed near his head. The impact boomed through the water and rattled his senses. A whale's tail can generate tons of force. One solid hit can break ribs and damage internal organs. The young king aborted the attack, pulling back quickly. It looked like failure, but it was a lesson. Whales will use every last drop of strength to defend their calves. As he steadied himself, a different scent reached him. Not whale blood, but another predator. Low-frequency clicks in short bursts. Orca signals. Killer whales are among the most dangerous rivals to a megalodon. A lone orca might not be fatal, but a coordinated pod could overwhelm even the mightiest shark. Their arrival changed everything. If he kept attacking, he risked becoming the target for both whales and orcas. Sometimes in the ocean, retreat is the best strategy. He shadowed the pod, keeping his distance, watching both the whales and the orcas. The grey whales tightened formation further, calves in the center, adults forming a living wall. The orcas circled outside. Testing for weaknesses, it created a complex opportunity. If the orcas attacked and broke the circle, the young king could move in on the weaker individuals. But patience would be everything. Hours passed. The ocean became an invisible chessboard. Every player waiting for the perfect move. The Megalodon drifted with the current parallel to the pod, eyes fixed on the section holding the calves. As the sun dipped, the orcas made their first strike, to hit one side while others distracted from the opposite. The classic orca tactic, divide and conquer. When the circle faltered, the young king exploded into motion through the thermocline at full speed. His target, the tired female and her calf, the mother, drained from fending off the orcas, moved sluggishly. He slammed beneath her pectoral fin again. She lurched, the calf alone once more. But then an orca turned directly toward him. This was no longer a hunt. It was a confrontation between apex predators, and the young king knew that to survive, he would need every ounce of speed and cunning he had. When the orca attack began, the ocean became the stage for a chaotic dance of giants weighing hundreds of tons. The whale circle was breaking under pressure from all sides. Massive bodies collided in the water, and the silence beneath the waves was replaced by deep, thunderous sounds. Low-frequency whale cries and high-frequency orca clicks clashed like two languages at war. The young Megalodon positioned himself right at the edge of the chaos. His eyes followed the scene with the cold determination of a predator waiting for the perfect moment. The calves were still in the center of the circle, but a few whales were slowly drifting away from the middle that was pure gold, for both the orcas and for him. But the orcas had noticed him too. One in particular, a large male with a black dorsal side and a stark white underside, a scar behind His gill told of a past battle, perhaps with another apex predator. In his eyes burned a sharp intelligence that saw the Megalodon not just as another creature, but as a rival. Biologists say orcas are among the ocean's most intelligent hunters, with group tactics, complex communication, and coordinated strikes. They are nearly flawless killing machines. But this male broke slightly from his group, moving straight toward the This was no idle curiosity. It was a message. I rule here. The young king watched his approaching rival carefully. The orca swam sideways, keeping constant eye contact. This stare in the water was the equivalent of lions challenging each other on land. Each predator was measuring the other's strength, speed, and resolve. The first move came from the orca. Using his pectoral fin like a wide blade, he made a sudden turn, cutting directly in front of the Megalodon. It was meant to slow him down and shrink his maneuvering space. But the young king used his agility, shifted direction, slipped under the orca, and sank back below the thermocline. Here, the thermocline was not just a temperature barrier. It was a natural curtain that limited vision. The Megalodon planned a sudden strike from beneath it, but the orca kept changing position to spoil any potential attack. It was like two chess masters trading moves. The young king rose slightly from below, aiming for the soft spot under the orca's pectoral fin. But orcas are flexible and quick to react. Two threats from the side, just as he reached striking range. The orca spun in a spiral and lashed out with his tail. A tail strike, not as powerful as a whale's, but still capable of delivering tons of force. The blow hit the Megalodon's right flank, sending a shudder through his massive frame. He was dazed for only a moment, his thick skin and muscle absorbing the impact. Then he recovered and pulled back within seconds. The orca closed the gap again, this time baring his teeth as he rose toward the surface. Orca teeth, unlike the serrated blades of a Megalodon, are conical, built for gripping and tearing. A solid bite to a fin or tail lobe could cripple his maneuverability. The young king sensed the intent. He shifted quickly, sliding under the orca's jaw. Here he delivered a shallow test bite to the belly, not enough to kill, but enough to send a message: I am dangerous too. The orca pulled back a few meters, but retreat was not the end, only the start of a new tactic. He clicked rapidly, sending short pulses to the others. We do not know exactly what these signals mean, but they are believed to coordinate attacks or share threats within minutes. Two female orcas joined the scene. Now the young Megalodon faced not one, but a small group that changed everything in groups. Orcas attack from multiple directions, narrowing the prey's escape and draining its energy fast. The young king went on the defensive. He sank deeper, using the dim light to keep his attack angle unpredictable. But the orcas read his every move. One distracted him, another approached from below, and the third tried to get behind him. The first serious blow came from the rear. A female orca bit hard into the Megalodon's tail lobe. It is a known tactic among predators. Disable the tail, and you kill the speed. The bite was shallow, but painful. The young king whipped his tail, forcing the attacker to release. Now came the decision: fight or retreat. Even apex predators conserve their strength when the odds turn. But there was another factor. The whale pod was still close. If the orcas turned their full attention back to the whales, he might yet find an opening. But to do that, he would need to keep this small group busy. The young king chose a risky strategy. From the depths, he burst upward, slamming into the largest male orca. Not a killing strike, but a move to open space. The impact sent the orca drifting back. The other two were slow to reposition, and that gave the Megalodon a narrow escape route. He used it, diving under the whale pod. Now, the orcas had a problem. Attacking a Megalodon inside the whale circle would only disrupt their hunt. The young king meant to use this chaos to his advantage. His sudden presence among the whales startled both. Friend and foe, the orcas paused. The whales tightened their defense. It gave him a short but critical moment to breathe. But orcas do not give up easily. They began to circle again. No eye contact, just patient, deliberate movement. A clear sign that this game was far from over, and the young king knew the second act of this battle would be far more brutal. As the first act of the orca assault closed, the deep layers of the ocean held a heavy hum, while the waters near the surface carried the shattered remains of order. The whale circle was still intact, yet loosened calves tense, and the adults pushing their breathing limits. On the young Megalodon's body, the warm trace of pain lingered from the bite it had taken to its tail moments ago. That sting was a warning he carried like a memory. This war would not be won by tooth power alone. As the orcas pulled to the outer edge of the circle to regroup, the Megalodon slid into the dark emptiness beneath the whales. From the deep blue, he watched the pod like a shadow curtain. Sharks do not rise to breathe air like mammals. Water flows over their gills, drawing oxygen through diffusion. This gives them a strategic edge in long, deep encounters. Orcas, however, must surface periodically to breathe, and that necessity leaves small but persistent openings. At the end of each cycle, after a brief pause, the orca group returned, entering the stage with a change of tactics. The large male, flanked by two females, took a triangular formation, probing one flank of the pod. One pressed from the front, another distracted from the side. The third closed from behind to block escape. Marine biologists call this a coordinated, multi-directional attack, a formation especially effective in breaking apart medium-sized whale pods. The young Megalodon, watching this play from below, made his decision. Instead of attacking the whale circle directly, he would break the orcas' rhythm, using their forced breathing cycles against the pressure of the deep. Below, just under the thermocline, the water acted like a thick curtain. Density and temperature differences made him nearly invisible from above. That curtain was a predator's best cloak. The first move was an invisible collision. As the large male orca arced along the outside of the whale circle, the Megalodon burst from the thermocline like a torpedo. Instead of striking, he sliced through the water column beneath the orca's pectoral fin, creating a sharp pressure wave. The orca staggered, losing its line, and in underwater combat, a second's imbalance can mean a lifetime's defeat. The Megalodon slipped back beneath the curtain into the womb of darkness. The female orcas clicked short, correction signals, high-frequency pulses that echo through the water column. But the thermocline bent the echoes, cutting their range. The Megalodon was counting on this. Below, the water was colder, yet his massive body retained heat longer. Regional endothermy, found in land-edge sharks like great whites, may have been an inherited trait in Megalodon. Though the evidence is limited, his size and hunting style supported the theory. It let him keep muscle performance high, even in cold water. As the orcas prepared for their second wave, one adult whale's breathing grew shallow. A white column of vapor rose at the surface. The circle opened. A calf drifted toward the edge. The young Megalodon narrowed his pectoral fins, the signal of an attack preparation. But the target was not calf or mother. It was the Orca's rhythm. He rose again from the thermocline, brushing lightly beneath the female orca. A shark's skin is covered with dermal denticles, tiny tooth-like scales, creating a sandpaper effect. The female flinched, forced to alter her path. The whale mother seized the moment, pushing the calf back to the center. The wasted no time, vanishing once more under the curtain. Above, the game shifted. Below, the story stayed the same. Hit, vanish, wait. This triple cycle is the classic deepwater strategy of a patient shark. When the orcas began their third wave, the Megalodon used another advantage: pressure and breath economy. Whales and orcas are mammals. Their myoglobin-rich muscles and slowed heartbeats let them dive long. But there are limits. Orcas tend to surface every 10 to 15 minutes, and extended dives shorten the next breathing interval. Sharks, however, keep extracting oxygen as long as they swim into the current. Every minute, the Megalodon stayed deep. The orcas were losing time, and finally, the orcas began to rush. And rushing is the most expensive mistake in an underwater hunt. The large male lunged at one flank of the whale circle, trying to pull a calf away. The Megalodon burst from the curtain, raking a long test bite along the soft line of the male's belly. Shallow but painful, blood spilled into the water. The females broke off to return. The attack order collapsed. The Megalodon dove deep, whipping his tail to create a cloud of cavitation bubbles. Not deadly here, but enough to create visual confusion. The large male was enraged, and now the target was the Megalodon. They moved to close him in, upper female from above, the male cutting from the side, the second female rising from below. In a three-way closure, the only escape was vertical. Instead of moving parallel to the thermocline, he spiraled sharply upward, forcing all three orcas to veer away. But at the top of the spiral, he found himself closer to the surface than planned. In the orcas realm, surface combat holds two dangers for sharks: wave turbulence below and visual exposure from above. The large male surged, trying to lock his conical teeth onto the Megalodon's right pectoral fin. The grip lasted a heartbeat before the Megalodon pulled the fin clear and slammed his head sideways into the orca's lower jaw. The cartilage absorbed the shock. Teeth slid. The grip broke. He rammed the orca's chest fin joint, not to wound, but to shock, buying precious seconds. Below, oxygen was plenty, and time was his. He drew a wide arc under the thermocline, building speed in silence. The orcas scanned with sonar clicks, but the water's density scattered the echoes. The Megalodon struck from the acoustic blind spot, locking onto the male's tail. Peduncle here, muscle and nerve are dense, protective fat thin. The bite held for a second, enough to cripple propulsion before he let go and dropped away. Above, power balance was broken. The male could no longer push full speed. Females had to guard him and give up the whale chase. The Megalodon had claimed the strategic upper hand. The whales tightened their circle. Calves returned to the core. The orcas fell back, drawing wide arcs, then turned north. Round one went to the Megalodon. He hung in the cool, dark body, marked by small scrapes, muscles relaxing in slow rhythm. The whales resumed steady breathing, even the weakest among them cutting the water in quiet triumph. Victories in the ocean are often recorded in silence, and the Megalodon had left his mark: a burn-like bite on an orca's tail, an echoing gap in the thermocline, a restored circle in the heart of the whales. But the law of the deep is clear. Every victory invites the next trial. The orcas were not gone, merely changing their plan. The northern cold waters could be the next arena. Migration routes are the invisible lines that seat predator and prey at the same table again and again. The young Megalodon drifted with the current, testing his wounds, every fin still working. Not perfect, but good. Enough. And in the language of the deep, good enough means alive. Alive means planning the first move of the next encounter. The sun sank like a copper coin, darkness growing, the thermocline curtain thickening the oceans. Endless night taking the stage. The young king merged into that ancient sleep, yet it was the sleep of a predator, alert, because he knew the night is not just darkness. The night is the first line of the next battle, and that line was already being written. 2 days had passed since the orcas had pulled back. The whale pod, though still bearing the scars of the battle, continued along its migration route. Calves swam closer to their mothers, while the adults constantly scanned their surroundings. The young Megalodon followed a few hundred meters behind, cloaked in the safe darkness of the Thermocline. These days, the ocean seemed calm, yet calmness is the ocean's most deceptive face. In the depths, there is always movement, always preparation. The Megalodon knew the orcas had not fully given up. On this northbound route, missing a hunting opportunity, especially with calves present, could mean death. And a hungry pod of orcas could track for days, even weeks. The first sign came as a faint series of clicks drifting through the lower water layers. Orca echolocation signals could be detected from kilometers away. Yet these clicks were slower, lower in frequency than before the battle. This was not a full attack, but a tracking mode. They, like the Megalodon, were patient. The whales must have noticed these clicks, for the pod began to tighten. The circle formation was rebuilt, but looser this time. Tired bodies cannot hold a tight formation for long. This worked in the orca's favor. The Megalodon saw the opportunity. If he could draw the orca's attention away from the whales, he could shift the balance of this long migration. For this he chose the silent pursuit tactic. Silent pursuit is a complex strategy used when predators hunt each other. The goal is not to remain completely hidden, but to stay just below the target's perception threshold, applying constant pressure like a shadow that is always there yet never caught. The young king rose slowly toward the orca's position. His gill slits widened and narrowed. The rhythm of the water slowed. Every beat of his tail was calculated and silent. When he entered the range of the echolocation signals, he moved in small circles. This created acoustic echoes that distorted the sonar returns. The orcas could sense movement, but struggled to pinpoint a clear target. One female orca fired a burst of clicks, scanning the region. At that exact moment, the Megalodon dropped into a denser water layer, bending the echo and vanishing. This was a natural deception method used by deep water hunters. Then a disturbance appeared at the front of the whale pod. 2 young whales lost coordination, drifting a few meters from the main group. For the orcas, this was gold. One female surged ahead, another moved in from the side. The Megalodon saw the movement, but waited. He wanted to strike, not at the kill point, but in the shadow of pursuit. At the moment of first contact, the orca lunged to cut off the calf. From the depths, the Megalodon shot upward like an arrow. His target, the base of the orca's fin, the heart of maneuverability. The bite was shallow, but strong enough. The orca recoiled, giving the calf just enough time to rejoin the pod. The orcas were caught off guard. They had not expected the Megalodon this close in this moment. To them, this was a new threat. Yet this threat was not purely to defend the whales, but to protect his own domain. In the ocean, intentions are read, not by eyes, but by the rhythm of behavior. One female began to chase the Megalodon. This was exactly what the young king wanted. By pulling her away, he gave the whales more space. He descended, deeper and deeper, the female on his tail. The chase lasted 2 minutes, until they reached 300 meters, where the pressure shift was undeniable. Here, the Megalodon's advantage was clear. In the deep cold, his metabolism worked efficiently. His massive body retained heat. The orca burned through her oxygen reserves. She could not keep up and turned for the surface. This was the first victory of his tactic. By the time she surfaced, the orca formation was broken. The whales seized the gap, gaining several hundred meters. In the predator-prey games of the ocean, such moments were rare. A single right move could undo hours of pursuit. As sunset approached, the sea wore a blanket of gold and orange. The Megalodon slipped back into the depths of the thermocline. The battle was not over, but this round was his. The whales pressed on. The orcas slowed, forced to regroup. In the cradle of darkness, the young king drifted, knowing the final clash was close now, and that final clash would be written in the history of the deep. The third day's dawn rose over the sea beneath a layer of grey mist. The haze on the surface hid a different tension in the lower layers. The whale pod still moved north, but now they were aware of both the orcas and the Megalodon. This was the most dangerous point of the migration. A long, open water crossing, no shore, no rocks to hide behind, only open sea and the rules of the deep. That morning, the silence beneath the thermocline was broken. First a faint vibration, then rhythmic, sharp echolocation, clicks. The orcas had returned, and this time, in full force. The massive male, wounded in earlier clashes, swam in the center, but moved with greater caution now. 2 females at the front, a young male holding a wing position. This formation was the spearhead tactic. Its goal to overwhelm, prey, or rival with pressure from a single direction. The Megalodon did not attack immediately. When he heard the sounds, his plan was different. First, let the orcas focus all their energy on the whales. Then, at the most critical moment, deliver the blow. This was a rare ocean strategy, known as third-party predation, when one species disrupts another's hunt. To claim dominance over the prey, the whales sped up to maintain formation. Calves in the center, mothers on the edges, but that speed could not last. The orcas timed their breathing cycles and charged. The first contact came when the lead female tried to pierce the whale circle. The other female dived in right behind her to force a second gap. The young male maneuvered from below. At that moment, the Megalodon began to rise from the depths, his tail delivering short, tight beats close to his body, building power. Muscle fibers burned with stored energy. His eyes locked on the target, the massive male orca. This was the strategist of the group, and disabling him could collapse the entire attack plan. The ascent was like a bullet. 10 meters, 5 meters. Contact. The Megalodon slammed full body into the massive male's flank. It was 20 tons, hitting at 40 kilometers per hour. The orca staggered, balance broken. The others instantly shifted, positions clicking to coordinate. But this time, the Megalodon did not retreat. He turned the chaos into opportunity. His target, the tail peduncle, the the very core of propulsion. The bite was deep and powerful, serrated. Teeth tore muscle fibers. Blood clouded the water. The massive male twisted in pain, striking the Megalodon's body, but the damage was minimal. Now the leader's speed was greatly reduced. The Orcus panicked. Two females attacked from the sides to drive the Megalodon away. One clamped her jaws on his right pectoral fin. The other lunged for his head. The young king felt the pressure, but as one of the ocean's oldest predators, he used his maneuvering skill. With a sudden roll along his vertical axis, he slipped right between them. This move is known in fish biomechanics as a roll escape. Meanwhile, the whale pod seized the moment and surged northward. The calves now a little safer, but the orcas were not ready to give up. The young male, enraged by the leader's injury, charged the Megalodon. Their bodies collided with a force felt meters away. The young king had anticipated it. He drove his massive jaws into the base of the young male's dorsal fin. Among predators, the dorsal fin is key to maneuver stability. The bite was brief, but the shock forced the young male back. Now 2 orcas were injured, and group coordination weakened further. The water in the depths had turned a cloudy red. This could draw other predators, but it also heightened aggression. The Orcus made one last attempt, planning a 3-pronged attack, but the Megalodon's power was far from spent. With a massive tail strike, he flung the lead female to the side. Then, with a ramming maneuver, he knocked the second female away at the pectoral fin. The massive male still tried to fight, but lacked speed. The Megalodon approached one last time, not for a killing blow, but for a message of dominance. A heavy strike just behind the fin. In the primal language of the sea, it meant leave. The massive male met the eyes of the others, and the pod began to withdraw. The battle was over. The whales sped toward the horizon. The orcas retreated, guarding their wounded leader. The Megalodon remained alone. In the depths, a few scratches on his body, a small tear in his fin. But the victory was his. It was not just the triumph of strength, but of strategic patience. He had struck at the right time, and at the weakest points. Once again, the ocean's oldest law proved true. The predator who survives is the one who makes the right move at the right moment. As the sun sank into a crimson line on the horizon, the Megalodon glided down into the deep, slow, and resolute dot behind him. Remained the blood trail of the Orcus and the distant song of the whales. This battle would be etched into the silent history of the ocean and perhaps still echo beneath the waves thousands of years from now. For now, the king of the deep still held his throne.